The Trump administration has entered into discussions with members of Congress. They want to move forward with more economic relief, not just for Americans, of course. They certainly seem to be prioritizing businesses more than Americans when it comes to providing some stimulus money, some cash, so people will be able to pay their bills. So Steve Mnuchin actually discussed this proposal. It's coming from the Treasury Department on Fox Business. Let's watch.
The second component, and I refer to this as checks in the mail, but it's really money direct deposited. Most people, we have all their information. And the plan is $500 billion in two tranches. The first one would be $1,000 per person, $500 per child. So for a family of four, that's a $3,000 payment. As soon as Congress passes this, we'd get this out in 3 weeks. And then 6 weeks later, if the president still has a national emergency, we'll deliver another $3,000.
So as you mentioned there, the payments, if they pass what they're hoping to pass through Congress, they would provide economic relief in two different phases. But Mnuchin also said that the White House's plan would allocate $300 billion for small businesses, noting that, quote, there will be loan forgiveness for employers who keep their workers on the payroll. Now, when it comes to the funds that would be given to Americans, if it comes in two phases, the first phase would be allocated on April 6th, and the second would be allocated on May 18th. So there's more detail that I want to give you, but John, I wanted you to kind of jump in and tell me what you think so far.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, in terms of, I guess, sort of optics or quasi-optics, having him come out to be the person who is talking about that it seems like a poor choice to me. I mean, has there ever been a person in government service who cared less about the experience of an individual working person, let alone like the working class? I kind of doubt it. And also the way he communicated about that, I found to be a little bit dishonest. Like he runs through the example of what a family of four could expect, but then he goes on to talk about the later phases and he just starts using that $3,000 figure as sort of a standard. But there are a lot of people who are not a family of four. For individual people or for a couple, they're gonna obviously be getting less money. And it's like you throw around the number 3,000 and it seems like, okay, I could see that taking care of a lot of people's needs. But if you're just an individual and you're getting 1,000, there are like large parts of the entire country where that's not even going to cover your rent, let alone any other expenses you have as you're trying to survive this thing in a time when there's a very good chance that you're not going to be working. So I think for some people, this is going to be very reassuring. It might, temporarily stave off lots of concern, but there's going to be a lot of people where this is just sort of barely scratching the surface of what they need.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to clarify something that we were talking about on the show yesterday, because there was a lot of criticism toward Democrats who wanted to go through a stimulus package that would include, this, the whole notion of means testing, right? Should people qualify for it? And look, there are problems with that because means testing means that we'd have to go through bureaucracy. It would be more time consuming. People need money now to pay their bills now. And so how about give out the stimulus checks, and then after the fact, you can go ahead and tax people who didn't necessarily qualify for it or didn't necessarily mean it or need it. But here's the thing. Under what the Treasury Department is proposing, under what the White House is proposing, some people wouldn't qualify if their income is over a certain level, indicating that they want to incorporate some level of means testing. Now, let's give credit where credit is due, because Chuck Schumer and some other Democrats came out and said, no, this isn't enough. And so we've been critical of Chuck Schumer in the past when he deserves it, certainly. But in this case, he had some strong words for the White House. According to CNBC, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer argued on the floor of his chamber Wednesday that sending 1 or 2 time checks would not provide enough to support people who lose their jobs, essentially making the same point you just made, John. Schumer suggested that instead, how about provide expanded and beefed up unemployment insurance that would cover Americans for a much longer time and would provide a much bigger safety net. What I don't understand is why can't we beef up the social safety net and provide stimulus?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be either or? So, there's a critique there for Schumer as well. But at the same time, I think he does bring up a really good point about how, hey, this is a good opportunity to beef up the social safety net, the same social safety net that Republicans have been aggressive in, deteriorating.
Yeah, and look, I know this is going to be a little bit repetitive. We keep, sounding this horn or whatever, but had we already made progress on some of, for instance, Bernie Sanders' platform of issues, what he would want to do, we would already be better placed to weather this. We would need less emergency action. We would still need to do quite a bit, but people wouldn't have nearly the same concerns that they do about, is their health insurance going to cover the testing? If they lose their job, do they lose their health insurance? There's like a cascade of different ways that the way the system has been set up is designed in a way that is not going to weather these sorts of crises, where you have, not only a crisis in healthcare, but also a crisis in the economy. And the crisis in the economy is going to make the crisis in healthcare even worse. So, look, if they're moving in the direction of these policies, I think that that's a good thing. I think that we should keep the pressure on them to make sure that this isn't like, okay, a one-time UBI, and then we will never hear those letters uttered again by the leadership of either parties. We need to make sure that people get the assistance that they need now, but also use this as a learning opportunity for a country that has been needlessly resistant to these sorts of policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think that this is really the best opportunity to make the case. That's why I think it's important for Sanders to remain in the race, regardless of what his chances are. Because the second he drops out, people stop paying attention, right, to what his message is and what he's proposing. And it's not even about Bernie Sanders. It's about what he wants to accomplish for the working class in America, and how his proposals are really the only proposals that would have made us prepared for what we're going through right now had they been implemented before the fact, right? So it really shows the value of what he's proposing, and I want him to continue pushing that narrative so it would resonate with more voters. Because now it's just amazing to me. Some of my family members who aren't necessarily as progressive as we are, they're straight up Republicans in some cases. All of a sudden, they're demanding stimulus. All of a sudden, demanding unemployment benefits. All of a sudden, they're demanding the very things that Republican lawmakers have been against. And it's so incredible to me to see the likes of Joni Ernst saying, yeah, I'm a little concerned about what this is going to do to the deficit and all that, but this is important. We really need to do this. Mm-hmm. No, but we should have had a robust social safety net in place ahead of time, rather than dealing with the symptoms of a flawed system. Why don't we reform that system, right?
Yeah, and it was. This is maybe a weird. So you chose Joni Ernst. That's a great example. She's an elected Republican. I have a worse one, a more ridiculous one. But Ben Garrison, are you familiar with that name? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Ben Garrison, for people who don't know, he's the cartoonist that does these like a parody of someone who's a Trump bootlicker, but he does political cartoons for him. And he had one today that was it was helicopter Trump. He literally wrote that in the image, and it was Trump and Andrew Yang in a helicopter dumping cash over a city. And he's made cartoons before mocking UBI as this far left plot. And so it's an opportunity though, because some of these Trump supporters, they don't oppose these sorts of policies because they're actually opposed to them. And I don't even think that they substantively understand what socialism is to the level where they could be opposed to it. They just oppose it because they think their leader opposes it. But if he is going to, even sort of in a selfish way or a self-interested way, if he's going to dip his toes in these sorts of policies, and people who might have been resistant to it because Fox News tells them that they're bad, if they get a taste of it and they like it, then let's make sure that we have politicians that are providing that as not just a stopgap, but as a permanent path forward, a fundamental shift to our system that not only brings us out of this emergency, but makes sure that when the next one happens, and we probably will have, a future COVID or some other virus, something like that, that we're set up as well as we possibly can to deal with it.
Yeah, that way we're not wasting any time in Congress debating whether or not testing and treatment for a pandemic should be free. Yeah. I mean, what a waste of time. Of course it should be free. I mean, it makes the country better prepared for these types of situations. We were devastatingly unprepared, and we've wasted so much time debating things that we should have already had.